Welcome back. You're watching Choice 2017 here on KTN News. Now, Kenyans from different walks of life have been angered by the declaration or the utterances by the National Super Alliance to boycott the August 8th 2017 general election if the Court of Appeal does not rule in their favor in that case, in that appeal by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission over the tallying or the declaration of presidential results at the constituency level. Meanwhile, the Jubilee administration has dared NASA to make real their threats. Take a look.
Wale wakutishwa si Jubilee, si IEBC, si mahakama. Wewe kama hauna kura, unabeba bango imeandikwa 10 million. Na hiyo ni bango la gushi.
Those of us who practice law and who have studied constitutional law and who have watched the trends of decisions by the courts will be keenly watching to see whether the decision of the Court of Appeal is going to be influenced by the threats of NASA.
That shouldn't be a problem. And therefore, what we urge the judges is to completely be independent of the rhetoric that is going on. I think the noise may be deafening, but purely to politicians. The judges, I'm sure, is falling on deaf ear. So they must continue then to ignore the noise and sounds that are merely rhetoric and do what is just to Kenyans.
We're asking you on our poll question, do you think the IEBC was right to go to court over that ruling by the High Court? Let's take a look at some of your views very quickly. Dixon Mokua says, for what? They are not justified. Is that your brother?
No.
They're not justified whatsoever. Malicious intention are read early. How can someone sitting in Nairobi know the reality? Kemoli Mark says on Twitter, not justified. A case of the referee seeking to change the rules of the game. Malaga Jr. tweets and says no, because the presidential results announced by the constituency returning officers are then sent to Nairobi for tallying. Then the chairman announces the winner. One here from Samunguru says, verifying votes, as Brian said, by IEBC, from whom, if not the very officials who shall be in charge of results and declaring it at the center. And finally, Birech Ben says, IEBC, just like any other Kenyan, has a right to seek protection of the courts on matters that need legal interpretation. Agreeing with the IEBC there. Mulu Rasta says IEBC might have a point, but as long as Jubilee sides with them, it raises eyebrows. What do you think, Brian?
I think
Kenyans are wondering, why are you siding so much with the IEBC?
I side with the law. Otherwise, if there was no need to go to court for interpretation, everybody will interpret the law the way they want it. So IEBC, like any other Kenyan, like any other institution, has every right to go to court and seek clarification on such issues, because the Constitution also is very clear on the role of each returning officers, number one. Number two, the opposition can go ahead and boycott the election. After all, it's only one candidate out of 17. So the 16 candidates will square it out together, and it will give us an assailable lead in that part. But they should not threat the courts or try to intimidate them in their rallies.
The boycotting thing, do you think they're just bluffing?
Well, I doubt whether they'll boycott the election. And I wish to correct Mbogwa that we have 18 presidential candidates, and it's going to be a two-horse race. So the rest are really ceremonial candidates. Their participation is immaterial. If for some reason Raila decides to push the envelope and he doesn't participate in this election, then there's a chance that 50% of the nation is not going to vote, and then it's going to be an illegitimate election. And I think for Mr. Mbogwa and Jubilee, they actually need to support NASA on this particular matter. Because you recall, when Raila Odinga said that we need to reform IEBC, Jubilee were rolling their eyes.
Right.
Most of the MPs said, why do we need to reform IEBC? IEBC is very solid. It's very interesting now for the Jubilee candidates who are beaten in the party primaries, all of them coming up saying, we now need to have free, fair, and credible elections. Mm-hmm. And most of them are from Jubilee strongholds. So, in as much as now Mr. Mbogwa may be thinking that these amendments or the High Court's ruling is going to benefit NASA, at the end of the day, it may actually come out to benefit Jubilee. So probably they need to support Raila for the first time.
Let
in
me
that
take you back
position.
to your, what if NASA were to boycott the election and there was less than 50%, would that make the election not legitimate?
Well, you know, there are two ways of looking at it. In theory, there'll be an election because one person has boycotted. But again, you can take this to a very good bank. If NASA says they're not participating in the election, then 50% of Kenya will not vote. And even looking at the constitutional provision on the bare minimum that you need to qualify to become a president, then there's a very high chance that Chebukati will be at a loss. And that's an extreme side that we shouldn't even be anticipating.
All right.
Let all Kenyans of goodwill ensure that we got a free, fair, and more important, credible election.
But what do you think about that, Brian?
I think Dimas is dreaming. Election will be held. We have other candidates. People will seek elective positions for governors, senators, women rep, even in NASA stronghold. People at the top are very selfish. And politics is local. So an MCA will not boycott an election because Baba said they will not participate in an election. They will go, and I'm sure they will vote even for president. Trust you me. So the percentage that he's asking for that 50% as turnout is considered as the 100% of the total vote cast. So the percentages will be calculated from the 50% who have cast their votes.
All right.
So whatever he's saying is immature.
I would want to encourage Mbogwa to be listening to these events live when he's not participating in them. When Raila Odinga said that they're not going to participate, it did not refer to Raila Odinga, the presidential candidate. It means Raila Odinga and NASA, the entire of NASA, including the MCAs, governors.
That's
and
why I'm
everything.
saying, even in NASA zone, there are other parties with aspirants and candidates. So
Now
ABC cannot be held hostage by
All right,
just
now
one
that
party.
we're still talking about the politics of it, Raila Odinga, the NASA presidential flag bearer, did say that IEBC accused IEBC of advancing your Jubilee interest. What do you say to that?
Raila has a history of just mentioning things that he cannot even substantiate. We've seen him being pinned down in some interviews, trying to explain what he said in other forums, and he tried to defend it. No, I meant this, I meant this, I meant this. First of all, IEBC does not represent Jubilee. IEBC is the referee. And we've seen IEBC, whatever they want to make decision, they invite all the stakeholders. We've seen NASA going and issuing press statement from IEBC offices. We've seen IEBC going to Jubilee offices because they are key players in this election, and IEBC must engage all of them. So NASA, my reasoning is, in all their rallies, they've not told Kenyans what they'll do for them. In case of infrastructure or healthcare, as I say, election will be rigged, constituency tallying center should be final.
All right.
They have no agenda whatsoever for the people of this
But
country.
the tragedy we have in Kenya is, if NASA supports a good thing, Jubilee will say it's a bad thing. If Jubilee supports a good thing, NASA will say a bad thing. So at some stage you begin to wonder, where are we as a nation? The only time where President Kenyatta and the NASA leadership were in harmony is on the anti-party opening rules. That's what they read from the same booklet. And also when the MPs want to increase their salaries. But again, I think as a nation, we now need to begin to cure this mistrust. That it's not necessarily the case that if a Jubilee is supporting a position, then NASA must say that it's a bad and the conference. We must now start looking at Wanjiku. What are Wanjiku's interest in this case? And if you ask Mbogwa right now, what does Wanjiku want? Wanjiku wants a peaceful election. That on the 8th of August, she wakes up early in the morning, casts a ballot, the returning officer makes the announcement, we get to know who has won, we get to know who has lost, and then the following day, it must be business as usual. We don't want a simple legal interpretation to make the nation to get into some moments of attention for a week or 2 weeks while we don't know what is happening. So it's important for NASA and Jubilee to agree on one point.
Very
and even
quickly,
for IBC withdraw their
allow me
case.
to be the devil's advocate for a minute here. This question to you, Dismas. The NASA are complaining about why the IBC went to court to appeal this ruling by the High Court. One would remember that a few months ago, NASA led, Isaac Hassan team being, pushed out of office, the former IEBC commission, and they were involved in the very formation of the current IEBC Commission as it is currently constituted. Why would NASA then be complaining about the same commission? Some people will be asking that.
Well, that's an unfair question you're asking me. That's supposed to be Magaya. But I'll attempt
Right,
to...
just attempt
Yeah,
to...
but
what would be their thinking?
I'll attempt to read their mind.
Yes.
Number one, as I indicated earlier on, Raila Odinga has seen his votes. He says his votes have been stolen on 2 occasions. And he has identified the pain spots. If you stay in a house, he has identified where the bulbs use as an inlet and an exit. So he has identified that it's at the constituency level. That's where his votes are stolen. And then number 2, he wanted to kick out the entire commission. He has done. And I would imagine from where they're seated, they're very happy with the state of IBC, save only for that one. And this is not even an issue by NASA, as Mbogo indicated earlier on. It's some activists who went to court. And the question you need to ask yourself, these activists, again, did they go there on their own motion? Were they sponsored by NASA? Were they sponsored by Jubilee? But it doesn't matter right now who sponsored them.
All right.
The High Court has made a ruling that it's going to be the returning officers. And for me, I don't have a problem with and there shouldn't be a problem in anybody going to IBC. But again, the question is, what motivated IBC to go and seek for that? IBC says they're looking for clarity. And maybe we should now wait for that clarity to come from the Court of Appeal. And also given that at the Supreme Court, there's a precedent, the case of Shabal and Joe. So at this stage, we are hoping that at the members in the judiciary, the Court of Appeal, they'll be looking at Wanjiko's interest. They'll be looking at public interest. They must not try to look at the interest of Mr. Raila Odinga or President Kenyatta. They must look at the interest of Kenya. What serves our interest? And maybe at this stage, maybe they need to get their research assistants to go review the Krieger reports of the 2007 post-election and find out what caused that violence. And maybe a question to Mbogwa is, why are they worried? If everybody trusts IBC to deliver a free, fair, credible election, why are they worried of the fact that the returning officer can actually make the announcement? And if there's anything wrong, anybody disappointed, they can go to court and have the High Court make a determination on that.
Why are you worried?
First of all, Jubilee is not part of this ruling whatsoever. You've not seen any Jubilee person commenting on the issue. The only issue they've commented is on opposition intimidating the judiciary, number one. Number 2, the reason IEBC is going to court is because there are different laws governing election in Kenya. We have the Constitution, we have the Election Act, we have the IEBC Act, which different acts give different story on who should conduct what election. So IEBC must seek that clarity because to them, the regulation says, and according to the Constitution, that the chairman is the returning officer for the presidential election. So once that is taken away from them, and the judges ignore other provision in the Election Act and the IEBC Act, it leaves them in a limbo, for which they need interpretation. Because, Ben, I'll tell you for a fact, the problem is not during the election period. The problem is after the results has been announced and the people feel aggrieved.
But here's a question for you, Brian. Do you think that IBC are accepting that they don't trust their system they already have at the constituency level?
No,
they
no,
don't
no,
trust
no.
those numbers that will be coming from their arrows.
No, you are missing the point of IBC. It's simple, like in the house. Maybe if you have a wife, she pays rent, you buy food, or vice versa. Or vice versa. There's that rule that is there. And as I've said earlier, the Constitution is clear on which returning officer is responsible for which election.
All right,
so the
enough.
constituency returning officer is responsible for the MPs and MC election, the counties for the county seat, governor, senator, women rep. Then the chairman of IBC is responsible for presidential election. If he's responsible for presidential election, he's the one to be held accountable for that election.
All right.
So he has to verify before he announces.
Do you consider this, what NASA are doing, intimidation of the courts?
Well, it's not intimidation. If I were in Raila's position, I would do the same, probably with a lot more energy and more vigor, because I've been beaten in the past on 2 occasions. And you exactly know, according to him, he knows how his votes were stolen. So for me, I would make noise. But again, it would be very disappointing and surprising to imagine that the judges of the Court of Appeal are going to write a ruling based on Mr. Odinga's expectation. That would be really shocking. And when you speak to lawyers and the people who understand how the judiciary works, they would say The judges can listen to everything, but when they resign to their chambers to do the ruling, they'll be guided, number one, by Wanjiko's interest, public interest, and the rule of law and what has happened. And for them, they're going to be spoiled by choice, because there's a Supreme Court president, and then there's also the High Court ruling. But more important, when these judges are making a ruling, and it depends on which kind of jurisprudence and philosophy they're looking at the end of the day, Ben, the question is, what serves Wanjiko's interest in this election?
All right.
I think that's the bottom line.
Thank you. Why do you think this is intimidating the courts?
First of all, it's weird that NASA is not part of the ruling. It's not part of the motion that is before court. So saying that he should rule in their favor, first of all, it's a farce. That's not the case. Number two, that's not how you talk to the judiciary. You know, in any contest, there's a winner and there's a loser. So according to Raila Odinga, unless he's declared the winner, the election was not free and it was not fair.
Thank you. In our Twitter poll question, we did ask you, do you think the IEBC was right to go to the Court of Appeal to appeal that decision by that ruling by the High Court? Very quickly, Mzalendo says someone will not accept results, whether at constituency or polling center. It's a fallacy to believe that any court ruling will change anything. Nathan Aurora says, yes, courts can help settle this amicably and ensure that the matter is not politicized. Finally, one year from Okeo Nikki on Twitter, who says, no. Why are they afraid to do so? What are they going to announce at Bomas, if not from the constituency? Thanks for your tweets as well as texts. Thank you, Brian Bogwa, a Jubilee strategist, as well as political risk analyst here on KTN News at this month's Mokwa. Thank you for your thoughts, gentlemen. Many thanks for staying with us here. Keep the conversation on going online on Twitter. This is a developing story we are keeping an eye on. We shall be analyzing the issues as they come up, as we continue to keep an eye on what happens and wait for that ruling by the Court of Appeal, an appeal by the IEBC on that ruling by the High Court of Kenya, saying that the presidential election results declared at the constituency level be final. That's why we leave it on the program this evening. Many thanks for staying with us. I'm Ben Kitili. Good night from the KTN News Center. Don't go too far. Up next is Monday Night News with Yvonne Okwara Matole.